The Menscape
The
Podcast.
Menscape Podcast with Carl.J. Ashley.
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the December edition of the Menscape Podcast with the one and only Mr. Paul Congdon. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm doing good, Carl. Thanks for having me on, man.
No problem at all. We better mention we're sponsored by Right Coach Ireland this month, and but without further ado, why won't you tell us who you are and what you do?
So my name is Paul Congdon. I'm the publisher of a magazine called Positive Life, which is probably, I suppose, one of the main holistic magazines in Ireland. So our mission statement really is to kind of uplift people and spread good news. I mean, that's the basic principle.
It's a good start.
Yeah, and I was amazed when I took the magazine on how much good news there actually is out there. I mean, it just doesn't get covered, but there's a ton of it, from healing to acts of kindness to new technology that's coming online, so many different things, sustainability, many different areas, and that's what I do. And I also run events where I host people like Bruce Lipton, or I do concerts as well in the RDS with people like Snatam Kaur, Diva Pramal. So it's kind of like world music and also spiritual teachers and authors who come to Ireland to do workshops or talks, So that's kind of the two main strands of what I do in the last couple of years.
Excellent. And how did you get into that? Was it just a natural process? Were you always involved in sort of holistic vibes and healing and sort of public speaking and what have you?
So I wasn't really, no. My background was in finance. I was kind of weirdly, I was an actor for a while, and then I got into finance, which was a bit of a curveball, really, for someone who's into art, into being an artist. So it was basically couldn't pay the way as an actor. You know how it is as an actor. So in order to supplement the craft, I was looking for something to do. And I ended up working for this guy. The International Coin Group was the name of the company, and they were selling rare coins. So that took me away for a long time, and I was traveling around the world doing that business, and it wasn't really me though, but I learned a ton. I learned from this.
I bet you did.
It's kind of like, it's like I just spoke to you before we came on about Glengarry Glen Ross, it's like sales. I was learning about sales.
Yeah.
But then I went to see Deepak Chopra years later do a talk in the National Concert Hall. And he was talking about synchronicity. And I was in a kind of doing advertising sales at the time for a publishing house. So I kind of would use my sales skills to supplement my kind of acting work, So I had this job at this company. I wasn't overly happy in it. I was looking for something different. It kind of crossed my mind fleetingly. Could you work in the spiritual area? Is that a possibility? And I didn't think you could make a living doing that kind of work, it's quite, just doesn't seem like you can, But I was standing there, and this lady had a magazine, like a pamphlet on the table, and the name was Positive Life. And I remember getting like kind of goosebumps when I saw the name. So it was one of those destiny moments we've all had, where I said to her, what are you doing? What's happening? And she said, oh, it's like a spiritual magazine. I do it from my home. It's just a little project I have. I don't think she had any plans to take it bigger or anything like that, but she said, I'm looking for someone to sell ads. Do you know anyone?
And you said, I do.
I said, I just happen to know quite the guy for you. And so she had manifested me for the sales, but Brilliant. I had manifested her for a bigger kind of a plan there, So it was, that was quite a moment. And yeah, quite a moment. That's what got me into it.
That's fascinating. I love it. I have my own spiritual teacher and counselor and therapist who I've been seeing for a long time. And he does all the psychic and holistic fairs around the country. And he was a guest on the Menscape podcast earlier this year. Shout out to Jerry Brown if he's watching. And Jerry got me to see that some of the most spiritual people are salespeople. And he got me to see that doing sales was not unspiritual. Because, like you maybe alluded to there, I thought there was a bit of a grind or a bit of a, that they didn't really fit in together, sales and spirituality. And then when you look at the attributes of a great salesperson, whether it's a man or a woman, you've got to turn up on time. You've got to speak the truth and say what you mean and mean what you say. You've got to be well dressed. You've got to be reliable. You've got to have integrity. When you look at the virtues and the values of a good salesperson, there's nothing that would sort of, be incongruent with being in spirituality as well. So I kind of had this epiphany where I realized you could be in sales and you could be spiritually inclined. There was nothing wrong with that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I've often reflected on that. They seem like opposing worlds, but when I think about it now, there's a lot of business involved in doing what I do. And if I was just kind of a guy who was like hippie style, it would be tricky. I've been trained how to negotiate, how to deal with people, how to be straight, how to be clear. And I remember the first thing they told us was always ask for the money up front, because money is a thing that people can be afraid of, particularly in spiritual circles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, it becomes, I've seen sales guys, they don't talk about money because they're afraid to talk about it. So, and it's very Irish as well. That's kind of in our psyche.
Man,
Americans
we
are
were
way
all
more
brought
right.
up being taught that it's easier for the camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. But here's our collection tin, pop some money in there, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And that has the legacy, it has an overspill. But my apprenticeship in sales was literally, I would go into Leeds city centre and pick up a bag of merchandise. They used to call it merchandising. I have a huge hold all of crap on my shoulder, pens, watches, and books, and just you name it, some over ordered stock from somewhere or other. And my job was to walk up to Headingley and back into Leeds city centre until I'd sold all the stuff on my back. So the bag got lighter as the day got on, and if I saw any place where there was people, like a launderette or a mechanic's yard, heaven was a factory where you could go in on their lunch break and just set your stuff up and pitch people. The rule of thumb in the pubs and clubs was look out for the biggest, hardest looking motherfucker in the place, because he'll sure as be looking out for you if you don't go and find him. And if you sell to him, everybody else will buy. The sheep
Okay.
factor, it works.
Works, yeah. Okay, nice.
So I did knocking on doors for a living then for a few years before I came to Ireland. And over here I sold Chorus door to door, Virgin, Aircom, Sky, and did a bit of advertising sales as well. But every sales job I've had has been easier than that merchandising one, the first one, because that was tough, you know?
Yeah, sounds it, man.
You'd have to work your socks off all day long just to make £30. And as I wrote about in my first book, I got pickpocketed by a prostitute down near the Corn Exchange in Leeds, and she grifted and lifted that £30 out of my back pocket, and it took her 30 seconds to earn what it had taken me 8 hours to earn.
Shit,
I was
that's
not
incredible.
impressed when I found out what had happened, I tell you. But it was an inexpensive lesson to learn in the scheme of things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good lesson, man. Yeah.
Yeah. If an attractive looking woman comes up to you and professes um
Flying love.
her desire for amour with you, even if you're a good looking guy in a suit, don't believe a word of it.
That's the moral of the story.
She played my ego like a fiddle, and the
Did
rest is
she? Wow.
history. Yeah. So I've got some questions. You
Yeah,
told us a bit about Positive Life magazine there. Um, what would you say has been your hardest lesson in life?
that's a good
Anything
question.
come to mind?
I did some psychedelics. And the reason for doing the psychedelics was not very well thought out at the time. It was this kind of impetuous act that I
Mm.
did. I would hear a lot of people talk about it in the community, and I felt like, I have a community around me of people, I was doing weekly events at the time. So I felt like they're all asking about, ayahuasca, these different things. What's the story, Paul? I didn't know anything about it. So I
Hmm.
remember going for a massage. This girl told me she did DMT, and it basically was amazing. She was in and out in a second. She saw the love of the world, and it was fantastic. And I was listening to all this kind of stuff, and I made an impetuous decision, and I went and did DMT, and it nearly killed me.
Do
I
you
mean,
remember much from it?
I don't remember much from the actual experience, but I had 2 years afterwards of processing
Wow.
um, fears, is what I would say. I couldn't function in the world. So I took myself with an impetuous decision into an abyss of fear. That's all I can describe it as. And now I will say that I can look back on it now. It was in 2014. We're 2024 now. It was 10 years ago. I can
Yeah.
look back on it now. I can't say it was the best thing that ever happened to me, but it was certain, the way these horrible things can be twisted, you know? And again, it's just a label. I'm calling it horrible, but it did bring me to a much more evolved place. And I'm a different person because of it. But that was the hardest lesson I ever learned because it was just so difficult. It was so difficult. I was suicidal. I
Wow.
was depressed. I
Yeah.
was anxious. I lost about 2.5 stone. I can't afford to lose 2.5 stone. I was like a dead man walking, So to have that experience, it was like having an experience that a guy would have in a tribe or something. You know what I mean? That we wouldn't do in the West. We just say, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
It was like something like that. I was walking around in the world, terrified all the time. And I remember going to this guy, Anthony Sharkey. He's a doctor, a medical doctor, but he's also one of those alternative kind of guys.
Yeah.
He said, how many hours in the day are you scared? I said, most of the hours of the day. And he said, what about when you sleep? I said, when I sleep, my heart would race, even while I'd be asleep. So he said to me, so you're scared 24 hours a day? I said, basically. When I'm asleep, I don't obviously even thinking about it. But when I wake up in the morning, it's boom, straight away again. He said, so you better get used to it then. And this was a real big moment because he said to me, I said, what do you mean get used to it? I don't want to get used to it. It's a horrible feeling. He said, you've no choice. You've no choice other than to make fear your friend. And
Wow.
that I did. I had no choice. He was right. I'm not saying I was brave. I was driving home that night and I thought he has a point here. I have no choice. This horrible feeling of anxiety that's nonstop in my body, I better get used to it. And yeah, I have a skill now that I didn't have before that experience. And yeah,
Mm.
that was a great question. Thanks for asking that. I don't often go back to that memory, but
No, it's very, very
that's
honest and brave of you to share that with us. Thank you. Was it yours? Was that feel? Was it coming from somewhere else and into you, or was it yours? Was the anxiety? Did it belong to you, or was it coming from somewhere else? Did it go?
It did go, yeah. I mean, but I'd had a period in my life before when I got into spirituality where I had anxiety. So it was similar, but this was way, way darker. But I have a friend who's a psychic intuitive,
Yeah,
and he told me that the reason I chose this experience, which was good to hear because I thought it was a mistake for a long time. And
yeah,
I don't think there are any mistakes, really, right? But it was tough not to say that wasn't at the time. But he said to me, this was orchestrated by you because you wanted to have a lot of growth in a short space of time. And he
wow.
told me that you're releasing all the fears, even from past lives, in one go. And he said, that's just the way your kind of soul likes it. Now, for the human aspect, it's tricky.
Yeah,
And it was.
yeah,
And I remember he said to me, your higher self is here. He has the ability to see different beings. And he'd never seen somebody's higher self. And he said, your higher self is here. And I was a shell of a man. I was pleading for help. And he said to me, your higher self has a message for you. I said, yeah, what is it? You're going to be okay. Now, I don't know about you, but like when I heard that then, I mean, all of us need to hear that now and again.
Right?
You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But that in that moment, I mean, I could have cried for a week when I heard that. I was like, wow. So they were a lot of fears that I hadn't processed. And basically it's like getting all of them in one go. That's what it felt like. It's pretty terrifying.
I had a similar experience, but it was more connected to emotional suppression, where I hadn't cried for about 30 years.
Wow.
And then in 2018, I guess around the summertime, August, September, I I started crying and I didn't stop for about 7 or 8 weeks. And I just literally cried and cried and cried all day, every day, literally crying in the car, crying at breakfast, crying in the gym, crying between phone calls at work. And I just couldn't stop crying. And I'd lost my dad. My dad had died. I'd lost my home. Me and my wife had agreed to separate. I'd lost my children. I'd lost my wife. I'd lost my dad. And my whole life kind of collapsed and fallen apart. And I was in this apartment in Limerick on my own. And as some people say, your life falls apart to kind of fall back together again, but in a better way. And I can look back on the time that I was crying now and see it as hugely beneficial,
Yeah.
huge release of emotion. I wasn't just crying over what had happened then. I was crying over stuff that had happened 20 years earlier that I hadn't grieved properly for.
Yeah.
So when my dog had died, or when my gran had died, or things had happened that I hadn't had the emotional intelligence or maturity to process and release. So it was like I was doing 30 years worth of work in the space of a few short weeks and just cry. I just got so used to crying all day, every day, literally 13, 14, 15 times a day for weeks on end. It was fucking nuts. Now, I don't know, did my soul choose it that way? Maybe it did, but that was how it happened, you know?
It's interesting you say that because it's title of your podcast is Menscape, isn't that right? Menscape.
It's just short for Mental Health Landscape, which was a group I created in the lockdown. Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Because I got interested about a year ago in kind of being a man, if you know what I mean, like being a real man. I was like, what's that mean? Because we were kind of sold the John Wayne thing and all of that kind of stuff.
Did you
Uh,
listen or read Iron John by Robert Bly?
You know what? You're the second person to recommend that book, and I think I got it out of the library, and I did read it. Yeah, so I love
Brilliant.
that whole.
Yeah,
Yeah, brilliant.
the ethos of masculinity and the journey of the man and society's kind of, I suppose, attack upon masculinity is
Yeah,
fairly evident if you look in the mainstream media and the way kids are being brought up. There's an absence of positive male role models, you know?
I didn't know that was so engineered. We found out a lot of stuff when the whole pandemic business happened. We found out a lot of things, but when you're talking about crime, my dad, when I hang out with my dad, right, he's that kind of man. He came from that generation. And he'd be talking to me now, right? And he'll say something like, your great grandfather. My great grandfather was an Indian man from Burma, and he'll say to me, you remember your great granddad? And I'll say, yeah, yeah. And because my great granddad was so kind, right? My dad starts crying. He talks about it. He
Lovely.
cannot hold the emotion in his body. His whole face wells up like he could be anywhere. He just can't. My dad would never cry when he was younger. There's no way he's gonna cry. But now there's an act of kindness or an animal or something or birds in the garden.
You
He's
tear
gone.
up. Yeah.
He's gone. He's actually losing the control of the situation. So you remind me of that.
Yeah, it feels like that sometimes for me. Having spent years and years of my life being what I would regard as emotionally constipated. Growing up in Manchester in the 70s, I was supposed to be a kind of a rough, tough mechanic, alpha male type guy. And there I was, small and skinny and sensitive, and never going to live up to anybody's idea of being an alpha male.
Yeah.
And so the corresponding kind of suppression and repression of the emotions. Boys Don't Cry, I think, was a Cure song, you know, and that
Great.
summed it up. Yeah. So it was huge just to be able to have feelings, let alone express them and be okay with being a man and feeling all right with being able to do that. But for a lot of men, it's they're still emotionally constipated, or haven't been shown that it's safe to express and feel their emotions. Depending on the sort of culture and the environment in which you're growing up. So, aside from Robert Bly's Iron Johns, another brilliant book I'm reading at the moment called The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, where he's talking about the initiation ceremony of young men in different cultures around the world and the
Right.
mythology associated with those cultures. And in the West, it's almost as if young men don't have any form of initiation by the older men in the community. So they're lost. They're lost to themselves. And, not all young men are lost, obviously, but you look at sort of guys like Jordan Peterson, who then have a huge following, and he's saying, young men are coming up to me in the streets, crying and shaking my hand and saying, "You've helped me, thank you so much." And he's breaking down in tears because they're complete strangers. He doesn't know, but all he knows is that what he's been doing is having a positive impact as a positive male role model in someone's life just through the internet.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
didn't need to meet.
yeah. And that's beautiful to hear, And it's
Yeah.
funny because the whole masculine thing is kind of, people like Trump, he's kind of invigorating that again. He's going back to that John Wayne thing again, When someone strikes you, strike harder, And but yet he's got some great qualities, because I feel it in myself, when I see him, I go, yeah, I like some of the stuff you're doing. But it's like it's a what's the term? Toxic masculinity.
That's real. It exists. I've walked down the street and seen fellas like on a building site where, they're spitting and chewing stuff out and throwing rubbish in the street and wolf whistling. It exists, but it's not all men.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's like it's refining. I can feel it's like a wine, and it's coming to its fruition. I can see it around me. Men like yourself, men I hang out with. There's a different flavor to us now. Particularly how we relate to the feminine as well, how we hold space for them. Like I had a lot of arguments with my girlfriends in the past, and I'm gone out with a girl now from Portugal, 2 years.
Right?
In this period, I met a guy called John Gray. I interviewed him. He's the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Ah, excellent.
And that book now has a frivolous kind of a title, right? And I kind of put it in that bracket. Like
Yeah,
when you said Iron John, it's quite a well thought out thing, Joseph Campbell. Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus doesn't sound very well thought out.
that was huge at the time. It had a huge impact, didn't it?
Yeah, that guy had I have to say, he just told me a few simple things and I did them in my relationship and I could not believe the impact they had. And also how I was evolving as a man, understanding what it meant to be a man. He's very wise, I would say. He did a workshop here in Dublin and I could see loads of couples in the audience and they were kind of going, Jesus, it's almost like it's so obvious,
Yeah.
But we're not doing it because we are a little bit brainwashed by what's going on online as well, what we're being told.
Yeah, I don't know when it happened, but I one morning just woke up and decided to embrace those parts of me that were quite feminine traits in nature, like being good at languages, left hemispheric sort of stuff. I did psychology degree, so we were doing neuropsychology and brain stuff, and that was mostly women. And then languages were mostly dominated by women. And I realized I was quite a few feminine attributes, even
Yeah.
though I'm a man.
Mm.
So this idea of being a man who is okay with having feminine traits allowed me to step into more authenticity than being a man who was afraid to show his emotions for fear of not looking like a man, which was absurd.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that sort of process or that experience has enabled me to now help others navigate a path through whatever they're going through, whether it's overcoming depression, addiction, lack of self-love, lack of self-esteem, and more recently, codependency, narcissistic abuse, and parental alienation. All of
Mm.
this stuff was there before. It's just coming up to be seen now. So we're seeing it more and more, and we're seeing the family trauma and the multi-generational family trauma play out. And as it plays out, your awareness of it is your kind of your ability to identify it, process it, and move on beyond it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
huge.
I think staying in that seat of beingness, not being defined by these kind of states, not being defined by, it's almost like we are beings, we're kind of definitely divine beings, I feel, and we embrace different aspects of ourselves when we need them and we drop them when we don't. But the beingness always remains there, the awareness, and that's where I think we're moving into living from a lot more, because there's so much around us and it's not really relevant, a lot of it's kind of illusory, yeah, because we are quite in the driving seat, and I think we're going to cop that now in the next few years, big time,
Thank you. That was a beautiful description. I like that.
It felt good
Yeah.
when I was saying it, yeah.
I've got some rather more mundane questions for you. Have you ever written your own book?
I haven't, no.
Not yet, says you.
Not yet. There's probably one in there. It's quite an interesting, yeah, there's a few interesting stories along the way, yeah.
I'd
So
say
you were
so.
everybody has a book in them, I would say, yeah. It's yeah, there's a book there.
Have you ever jumped out of a plane?
Never jumped out of a plane, no. I prefer to just stay on board.
Have you ever ridden a horse?
I have ridden a horse, yeah.
Driven a Ferrari?
Never drove a Ferrari. Was I in a Ferrari? I was in a kind of a sports car, but not quite a Ferrari. Yeah.
Have you ever had children?
Never had kids, no.
Have you ever eaten an insect?
No,
Have you ever walked on hot coals?
I have.
And have you ever done public speaking?
I do that a lot, yeah.
And have you ever cheated death?
Not like directly, no, but I feel that experience we talked about earlier, death was hovering around me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I suppose this is a bit tongue in cheek. Have you ever been abducted by aliens?
I have a good story there. I read a book by John E. Mack. Do you know who that is?
Name sounds familiar.
He's like a scientific kind of dude, and he was asked to commission a program to interview 1,000 abductees in New York City in the
Interesting.
1980s. So he
Yeah.
interviewed them all, going in as a complete skeptic, came out as a complete convert. He said, these people are telling the same things over and over again. This is happening. This is not like he regressed them all, did hypnosis. And I read that book, right? And I was living in England at the time. And I remember I was kind of in a play and I was on tour. I was staying in a hotel. And I was lying in bed that night and the thought dawned on me, you're reading a book about abductions. What if they abduct you?
Mhm.
I'm lying in the bed. And I remember it lasted about 4 weeks. I mean, who walks around being scared of being abducted by aliens? But I was scared of being abducted, but it never happened.
Wow. Yeah, I remember seeing, I suppose it must have gone back to the noughties when I was doing I was staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning watching conspiracy videos online. 9/11 was an inside job and all this. And I stumbled across a guy called David Icke interviewing a Zulu shaman called Credo Mutwa. And Credo describes the Zulu people have a name for these aliens called Chitahori. And he literally describes the process of how he was abducted by a Chitahori, taken off planet somewhere and tortured and then brought back again. And I'm like, okay, this guy's not fucking making this up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could tell from the way he was talking, it was a traumatizing thing that had happened, and he was recalling it in it with as much honesty and integrity as he could. He was an old man at the time, and a lot of the traditions of the Zulu people had been passed down orally. So it wasn't like there was books or
Yeah.
a written
Yeah.
sort of documented evidence of it, but they had a name for these aliens, and like that. After I watched that, I was walking around and thinking, "Don't fucking appear now! I'm not fucking coming." It's like you don't doubt it happens, but maybe you just hope it doesn't happen to you.
Yeah, I made a joke at the time saying I'm actually going to prepare the samples for them, leave them at the end of the bed and say, take what you need, lads, but don't take me.
Yeah, blimey. So that leads us quite nicely into what are your favorite books? Have you any books that you've read that have changed your life, or any books that you'd recommend to anybody watching?
Yeah, I'm a big, I love reading, I like the way it transports you into another world. I was telling you earlier, I'm reading that book by Al Pacino, Sonny Boy, at the moment. Oh, that's a great book. There's a part in the book where he talked, because I was an actor for years. I did this play once about this guy who was, he was murdered. And when I was doing the play, I spoke about where his body was found. And I remember having this moment, and it's in Al Pacino's book, where he talks about almost becoming transcendent when he's performing,
Right.
because he actually thinks he's the person that he's performing. Like
Get
he,
into character.
yeah, the lines blur, and he became the character. That happened to me in a play when I was talking about that guy who died, and I felt that guy's presence when I was on the stage. It was kind of a really funky moment. So books have an amazing power, as does any form of art. But I also loved a book called The Magus by John Fowles. Um,
Magus.
Magus, yeah. I don't know why that had such an impact on me. I read it on I think I was away on holidays, like a sun kind of holiday. And I read it, and it's about a Greek dude, and he has a mansion, and he kind of, there's this, John Fowles is quite an English writer, it's very
Right.
Englishy kind of. And this guy goes up to the house, and your man starts kind of playing with his mind, and it's kind of like just very interesting book. Really caught me at the time. And that's one. And Wuthering Heights, for some reason, I just love Wuthering Heights. The atmosphere of it, and
Not the Kate Bush song.
the Kate Bush song. I wouldn't be a Kate Bush massive fan, but the book, the actual original book, I think it's written by Emily Bronte, is it? Emily Bronte.
Or
Um,
Charlotte Bronte, I'm not sure. You
yeah,
could be
they
right.
were a family. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that book is amazing. And a little bit of Dickens, Great Expectations. That's a stunning piece of work.
You're a well-read man, obviously.
Yeah, I love. Yeah, I love film as well. So sometimes I might get it from the film as much as the book. But if you get a really good book that you can't put down, you know that feeling, yeah?
Most recently, yeah, what was the book? I was literally holding off from reading the last page for about a week just to
I
take my
know.
time over the last bit of it. It was I wasn't looking forward to having finished it and let it go.
I
But
know the
I've
feeling,
started
yeah.
getting into the habit of audiobooks. So I was listening to The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho,
Mm.
and I just absolute magic. I think I listened to literally 7 or 8 hours all day just listening to the audio book and being able to process it in a way like you can't beat, holding a book. As an author, I've written and published a few books, so you can't beat the magic of holding a book. But in the current sort of climate, it's very handy to have the audio books if you can get them and listen to them. And the Paulo Coelho one was absolutely brilliant. I loved that. I've that many books on the go at the minute, between the Joseph Campbell one I mentioned there as well. I have a David Icke book that's unfinished. Numerous books that are sat there waiting to be read. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki Roshi is sat there. But tell us
That's
about tell us about the films. You mentioned films. Any favorite movies that you'd recommend as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. I loved a movie called Bitter Moon. It's directed by Roman Polanski. Loved it. Just loved that film. It's got who's in it? I think I come back. Peter Coyote is in it. It's about the kind of the way in relationships love wanes, and couples kind of become disinterested in each other. Found that really fascinating. I love Daniel Day-Lewis. Anytime I see him, he always nails it. He did a movie a few years ago, Phantom Thread. Did you see that?
Was he the same guy that played the Irish Italian guy that was in the Guildford Four?
Yeah, yeah.
What was that movie called?
In the Name of the Father.
Thank you. Yeah, was that the same fella?
That's the same lad.
Yeah,
He's
I can't see him as anything else but that Irish
yeah.
Italian guy. No.
Well, he plays a 1950s fastidious English tailor who sorry, he's not a tailor. He makes women's dresses, and he
Okay.
is extraordinary in that. It's absolute. That's a real.
It sounds fascinating. You've given me some homework between the
Yeah,
books I haven't come across and the movies I haven't heard of there. Thank you so much.
you too, man. I'm going to read Zen Mind, actually. I love, that'd be a passion of mine at the moment, not thinking.
A meditation practice with sort of Thai Buddhist monks is what I've been doing for the last, when I think about it now, about 13, 14, maybe 15 years. I started going up to a Buddhist center in East Clare about 2009, where I'm still a sort of a Sangha member as a lay Buddhist. And I'm hopefully going over to England there next week to sit with monks in Amaravati, which is like the parent kind of monastery of what Sunyata is over here in Clare. And some of the monks you meet, it's amazing because they can just be, say, ordinary guys like you and me, and you're just chatting to them, but they just gave up handling money and being in society, and they sit and they meditate. But even though they can come across as just an ordinary guy like you and me, there's also something special about them as well, that they've undertaken this path. And some go into it later on in life, some go into it younger in life and disrobe, and some go into it and stay there a monk for like 50, 60, 70 years. It's
Yeah.
fascinating to hear their stories and their take on things. So I've been ingrained in sort of Thai forest Buddhism for the last few years and the teachings of Ajahn Chah, Ajahn Sumedho, and I've met quite a few of them. The experience I had in Bangkok in the summer of '98, which stayed with me and which I've also written about in my books, was my last day in Bangkok. I took off bored, disillusioned, and skint and fed up. And I just walked and walked and walked, remembering my way back to where I was staying. And I ended up, I'd say I must have walked 3 or 4 miles anyway, in sweltering heat. It was high humidity. And there was a shop selling all different kinds of sort of Buddhas. And I bought this tiny one was all my budget could afford. This little Buddha here,
Yeah.
even though there's ones much bigger than this guy. And as I came out of the shop with my little Buddha as a memento of my trip, I saw a little hut. And on the sign above the hut, it said Thai Astrological Society. And I thought, well, how can an organization with such a grand name be in such a small looking hut next to a shop selling Buddhas? So I went in there, and there was a Thai monk behind the counter, and he gave me this book of beautiful poetry. And as he did so, his head lit up like a light bulb. You know, like someone has flicked a switch,
Yeah.
and his head literally glowed. And I could feel mine glowing back in return because he was the only person in that whole time in Bangkok that had given me something for free, that he wasn't asking for it. And this sense of gratitude and this sense of generosity was huge. And as I stumbled outside, I had this kind of a weird sort of, my whole life going from growing up in Manchester to everywhere I've been to just being there in Bangkok and seeing a man's head glow like a light bulb and wondering, what the fuck is going on? This is like, what is actually, did this really happen? Is this
Yeah,
for
no.
real? And I've still got the beautiful book of poetry to this day, and it definitely did happen.
Wow, that's a great story, man.
Thank you. Yeah. The Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki Roshi was often recommended. So the more you become an experienced meditator, the better it is to seek the approach of the beginner. So you don't have any expectations about the process of sitting.
I had this, Joe Dispenza, his work, yeah.
Yeah, we came across Joe. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a guy, I actually interviewed him, Robert Sheen, he's in the new mag, and he was in Love Hate, you know that show?
Didn't see it, but I heard about it. Yeah.
Good actor, quite a high profile, and he wrote a book called Playing Dead, and the whole fame thing kind of got to him, and he was kind of hanging out with this, one of those kind of, I call them dolphin boys, those type of characters, a bit like the guy you're describing. They just have codas, they have ways of saying things, and they're always kind of celebrating life, those kind of dudes. They're usually kind of Eastern guys for whatever reason. It's not like, I'm not saying we don't have them in the West, but those guys have those kind of qualities. And Robert Sheen was complaining about fame and how intrusive it was and how it was affecting his life. Your man said to him, why don't you just accept it?
Sit with it.
Why don't you just enjoy it? Kind of an Indian dude, I think he sounds like in the book, And because Robert Sheen had never thought about that before, it just blew him away. He was just like, what? Your man said, why don't you just, accept it, go with the flow of it. And that caused him to write that book, Playing Dead. But I remember thinking myself one day, what about just not thinking? So I practice that a lot in my daily life. I meditate and I do a lot of exercises for the nervous system, breath work and stuff. But I actually, like when I'm talking to you now, before I came on, we can have thoughts about what I think about you, what I think about the podcast, what I think about the fact that I'm doing this, what I'm going to do later. And I'm really cultivating this ability to not engage in that so that I can have more spaciousness. So I'm just talking to you, and that's
being in the flow.
To the best of my ability. All I can do is just be in this moment and talk to you. I mean, because it's quite a skill to cultivate, though, isn't it? Because the mind is just loves keep going, distraction.
Yeah. Yeah. And the nature of mind, especially, as I say, you can be an experienced meditator and sit down sometimes and just not feel like you're getting anywhere because you've lost that beginner's mind, that childlike sort of wonder and awe at just how amazing things are and can be. Yeah. And you know yourself, if you've ever sort of played golf or played snooker or done kind of sports, when you're at your best is when you're not thinking. You're just in flow.
That's the best thing about sport, really.
You just get on and do it. Yeah.
I like to score goals on a soccer pitch, and you're not thinking about anything when you're doing that. It's amazing.
That was my childhood. Eat, sleep, and drink footy.
Did you
Ever since
play?
I was knee-high to a grasshopper.
You
Yeah.
play, yeah.
Yeah. I'd get the ball in my own goal and dribble past the entire opposition team and score a goal. I was a greedy little fucker, basically. I wouldn't pass because I was that good. And then I used to mither my mum and dad to come and watch me because there was no point doing this if there was no audience. And then so one day my mum came down and I couldn't even get past the first person. I just went to shit.
Yeah.
It was interesting that I needed that kind of validation, but it impacted me negatively to receive that somebody watching. If there was nobody watching, it was just brilliant.
That's a great lesson to learn, isn't it? My God.
Well, when I went to secondary school, I realized that there was lads way better than me, and they were bigger and they were stronger as well. So I barely got a look in, but at primary school, you couldn't catch me. I was fast and I was hot and I was good and like that. We didn't play rugby or Gaelic football or hurling or anything like that. So at the school I went to, it was just cricket in the summer and football in the winter. So all we ever did was play football.
When I was playing as a kid, I was a small guy. So I'd be playing soccer. The ball is in the air, right? It's coming, right? But it's not here yet. Guy elbowed me in the side of the head and knocked me that way, and he took the ball. And I thought, you can't do that. Well, you could. You could in
Good.
kind of competitive soccer. You can. So I set up a game 5, 10 years ago in the Monkstown Blue Pool where we play 7 aside and we also play in a full-size pitch. I called it holistic soccer. And I said, there's no contact,
Don't
no
be
contact,
elbowing each other in the
no
headland.
contact allowed. Right? And I reinvented and I said to myself, now I'm going to be the goal scorer I always wanted to be. And that's
Oh,
what I did. Now contact happens, but because we're going out there with this awareness of it, we keep it to such a minimum. But it's still a good game. Like we have people who play proper football. They come in and say, "This is great, man. Nobody's getting injured. And nobody really gets injured. Of course, if you fall or you pull something, that's a different story. But in terms of hurting each other, we don't do that because the game itself, man, it's so beautiful.
I gave up playing five-a-side in the lockdown because we just weren't meeting up and getting together. But at the time, I was in the gym 3 times a week and still doing five-a-side down the Wolf Tones in Shannon.
Wow.
And big grown men would be bouncing off me. I was feeling pretty strong and pretty fit. And I miss now that element of, being able to channel my anger and release my anger and
Yeah.
literally smack a ball as hard as you can.
That's a big part of it. Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, yeah. I miss that physical contact of, not necessarily trying to hurt someone or getting hurt, but just that outlet, for releasing anger and frustration and just running around. And some of the best games were just in torrential pouring rain.
It's
We'd
the best
literally
part
just a
about
bunch
games.
of us meet up. We used to play against Brazilian lads. The
Yeah.
Brazilian lads were brilliant, but they'd all be arguing amongst
Yeah.
themselves. They
Yeah.
were like a bunch of sort of women with handbags. They'd get on each other's nerves. And so we used to always beat them, cobbled together sort of English and Irish lads. But the Brazilians, technically, they were just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It was like the United Colours of Benetton up at UL when I first moved over here 20 odd years ago. We just turn up at 3 o'clock on a Sunday and nobody organised it. Nobody was texting lads. We just all turned up at the same pitch.
Brilliant.
Lads from Nigeria, Poland, Saudi Arabia. There was French, English, Irish, Scottish. It was unbelievable. It was brilliant. I loved it. I just always played football all my life till about 2 or 3 years ago. And now I'm getting fat and old.
Would you go back, do you think?
To five-a-side,
Yeah.
I would. Yeah, I definitely would. But I'd have to ease myself back into
Ease
it
yourself
gently.
in. Go back though, man. Go back. Really.
Yeah,
Like I'm 56, and there's guys on the pitch up there. I can't believe I'm playing soccer at 56. A lot of my mates, my drinking mates from the old days, they say, how can you play soccer? It's impossible.
yeah,
56. I have a guy he's 58, 59, a pal of mine. Now, I don't know. In some weird way, you can get nearly fit. I'm not fitter, but you play with more wisdom as you get older as well.
right.
You have more vision of the game, and your skills just get better and better because you're playing every week. Like my touch is better than it ever was. I can take a ball down now, turn it, boom. And all my whole strategy for scoring goals is as soon as I get it, I shoot. I just shoot in the direction of the goal. And 9 times out of 10, it goes in. And that's basically my strategy. People will say, how do you
Sign
score
him
so
up.
many goals? You hit it at the keeper. It's because a lot of guys are scared to shoot. They have
Right.
this, they get a bit nervy. So it's like I reinvented what happened to me when I was a kid. You know?
Interesting.
Yeah, I got a
Yeah.
second chance.
Yeah, one of the books I was telling someone about recently was Paul McGrath, Back from the Brink, where he described the sort of culture in the of sort of English football in the 70s and 80s obviously revolved a lot around drink. And he'd come on at half time, pissed, and would come off man of the match.
Oh yeah.
He was brilliant. He was untouchable. He was unbelievable. And it wasn't necessarily that he was that fast, it was his ability to read the game
Mm.
and be strong and have a gallon of whatever he drank inside of him as well. These days they've got dietitians and psychologists, right? And even oxygen chambers and crypto, what are they called? Cryogenic chambers.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
ain't going near a bar.
Yeah. Incredible machines now, footballers, yeah.
So, I'm conscious of the time now, and I don't want to
Yep.
keep you much longer. What has been your best trip abroad and why?
Best trip abroad, I would say, yeah, I'll go with that. I managed a rock band in the 90s and 2000. We went and supported Morrissey on a world tour, and we ended up going from city to city in the States. And the ones that stick in my mind, it was just being with a bunch of mates. They're all my pals. My brother was there. I brought him on the trip. We did gigs in Las Vegas, in LA, and that was a very special time,
Cool.
and an incredible experience. Yeah,
That was the soundtrack to my childhood, was doing a paper round at the age of 13, listening to the Smiths, right?
he is Smith fan. Yeah,
Well, you had no choice growing up in Manchester. It was like it's second nature. That's just what we did. We listened to the Smiths. I would do my paper round and go down to Piccadilly Records on a Saturday afternoon without fail and spend £4 on a latest Smiths album or Echo and the Bunnymen album. That was
I
just
love
that.
Echo and the Bunnymen.
So I've never felt so inadequate as an author reading Morrissey's autobiography there a few years ago. His ability with words and the way to express them, I'm like, fucking hell, I've got a lot of work to do to get anywhere near as good as this. Like, and you can see in the lyrics of the songs, the Smith songs, 30. you'd say even 40 years later, still sound fresh.
Incredible. There's a song he wrote called Cemetery Gates. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
A dreaded sunny day, and I'll meet you at the cemetery gates where Keats and Yeats are on my side, and you lose because Wilde is on yours. Like, where do you get that from? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he plagiarizes like there's no tomorrow, but he does it in such a good way, you know?
There was a gig in the summer, a buddy of mine from Dublin came down and got us a ticket to, and it was Johnny Marr playing at the St. John's Castle in Limerick. So again, Johnny Marr's just stood there belting out these songs from my childhood from 40 years ago, and it's like, am I really stood it? I was there with a peppermint tea and some dark chocolate. It was a very civilized gig compared to the gigs of younger days, where you queue up for hours for shit watered down beer. But
Yeah.
this was very civilized, and Johnny Marr was brilliant. He was mixing it up as well. He was playing some sort of other stuff and new stuff, and then a few Smith songs. But that was what we came for, was the old school stuff.
There is a light that never goes out. What a
I am
song.
human and I need to be loved, just
Yeah.
like anybody else does.
Yeah.
We were
It's,
all literally nearly crying, singing and crying at the same time. It's like, yeah, he's got a point.
I remember I was in this cafe on the tour, backstage where you get your food. And we were in, I think it was Leon or something like that. And standing there, Morrissey came in wearing a pair of navy sailor trousers. I'd say they're authentic. I'd say he got them off some sailor from the 1800s. Navy trousers like a board. And he walked across. I think he used to have egg and chips sometimes if he'd come in and eat with the crew. But I remember saying to him, there's some pair of pants you have on you there. And he loves the Irish accent. So he immediately lit up with a smile. And my nickname was Bones when I was younger. And he said to me, "Thank you so much, Bones."
English Blood, Irish Heart. Was it
Oh, man.
Irish Blood, English Heart? I can't remember what he called one of his more recent albums, but a lot of the lads living in Liverpool and Manchester were all second generation, third generation Irish, right?
Have you seen him play live ever?
Never.
Oh, I'd recommend it, Carl.
Yeah.
He's quite iconic. I've
I
seen
think
him
he'd
about,
gone to America and was living over there
yeah, he's
before I
coming
was
back to
old enough to
Ireland.
be able to go to gigs.
I'd
Yeah.
say you'd be here next year.
Excellent.
Mm. I'll
We'll
see you
have
at it.
to,
We'll have the green tea and the peppermint,
we'll get
whatever.
on to you for a ticket. So
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
chalk it down, chalk it down. He was I watched an interesting, was it an interview with Russell Brand, and he was talking about being a mate of Morrissey's and going to one of his gigs and doing a bit of stand up and getting heckled because he couldn't cope with Morrissey's audience.
Yeah. Do you hear what Marcy called COVID?
Go on.
Convid.
Yeah, you wouldn't be the only one calling it that either.
I know, but like at his level, you don't get many people saying anything.
But you see, at his level, you don't get many people moving abroad because they're not going to tolerate the bullshit in the British press and media, the NME and the tabloids printing rubbish, you know, to actually have the cojones to have your actions back up your words. He's obviously a man of integrity,
Yeah.
and he let his actions do the talking, even though he was very eloquent when required to do some talking. Yeah, definitely a hero from childhood.
Yeah.
Jesus, yeah, I'd love to go and see him play. Interesting to see Johnny Marr play as well. I don't think the chances are good that they're going to all get back together again, huh?
No, there was a rumor going around that Morrissey agreed. I don't really believe that. I would say I don't think he would do that at all. Not for any money.
But all the lads, Joyce, Rourke, Maher, Morrissey, all Irish lads, like.
Yeah, I think Rourke has died, hasn't he? Rourke died last year, I think.
That I didn't know.
I think so. I think he did, yeah.
The iconic Salford Lads Club album covers. The album covers were brilliant. That was what really got
Brilliant.
people the
Brilliant.
ability, as well as the lyrics and the songs, and obviously Johnny's ability to incorporate sort of folk music roots into English pop music, you know?
How Soon Is Now, that's a real classic, you know that one?
He was talking about how he got the sound from the riff,
Yeah.
where he was using like innovative techniques and stuff. Yeah. His people are from Athy, Kildare.
Johnny Mars,
Yeah,
are they? Wow.
just down the road from you.
I've seen him in the Electric Picnic. I saw him. Yeah, he's good. He's good. What the
And he's a
two of them
City
done.
fan, which makes him even better.
What? Is he a City fan? Yeah.
He's a City fan as well, yeah.
Are you a City fan? Yeah.
Blue blood, mate. It's there.
All
I
right,
see I see
cool,
the
man.
blue. I was on my dad's shoulders in the Kippax from about 1979 onwards. So I
Cool.
was there when we were shite, you know?
Yeah. You're having a tough period at the
It
moment,
looks
aren't
like we're going back to being shite. Yeah, things are kind of imploded a bit recently. We were top of the league with 7 wins and a draw out of 8 games. And I was thinking, this is looking good. And then we got like 0 wins in 6 games, got defeats at home, defeats away,
you?
struggling, injuries, and
Right.
all of a sudden Pep's under pressure.
Mm. Great team, though, man. What a team. But everybody ebbs and flows, you know?
Well, we
That's
missed the
great.
midfield like Yaya Toure and David Silva and Nigel de Jong. Jesus, they were some team.
Incredible players, man. Wow.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
love a good World Cup. That's what I love. I love a World Cup.
Yeah, the teams of Jack Charlton, the Irish teams of the 90s were something else, weren't they?
It was some crack, you know? I mean, that was an incredible period.
Watching
Beating
Ireland
them.
was better than watching England.
Yeah, it was incredible, you know?
Yeah, even though it was an Englishman managing them, he was bang on. The lads could play when they had to, but the style was fantastic. Get it
Uh,
up to him, knock it down, and support him, and they were brilliant to watch. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was all attack in a sense, you know? Yeah,
And we had a few good Irish players at City over the years. Richard Dunn, Shay Given, Niall Quinn.
yeah, yeah. Jez Quinn was good, you know? Quinn had great touch for a man of his height, you know?
Yeah, to see him on the pitch, he'd just be like standing towering over everybody else. He was huge.
Yeah.
And we had a young fella then called Stephen Ireland. But unfortunately, I don't know what happened to him. His nickname was Superman. And he was an unbelievable player. He was absolutely brilliant. And for whatever reason, he just fell by the wayside and his career didn't really blossom,
Is
you
he
know?
playing for us now, no?
I'm not sure. Who's us? Who do you follow?
Ireland.
You don't follow an English team, no?
No, I don't bother really. I mean, as a kid, I like Liverpool, but I don't. You know, I have buddies and they'd be saying to me, "Oh, I'm depressed about because Liverpool lost." And I'm like, well, I don't understand the connection, you know? But at the same time, you know, the connection is your own volition.
And
So,
every second person in Liverpool is called O'Reilly. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I could talk footy with you all day, Paul. So
Buddy's great, man. Buddy's great.
couple
If you
more
want to come up for a
questions.
game, you're welcome to come up and play with us
I
sometime.
think I'm gonna have to get myself a bit more fitter. I've just recently been in hospital with a kidney stone, so I've got to go back and have a procedure, and then I can start doing my at-home workouts and get a bit more strength, maybe get back in the gym and swim, and at that point I can think about it.
Think about it. Start drinking some coconut water. That's good for the kidney stones.
Right.
Breaks them down.
Thank you. Tell me, what is your favorite smell?
I like the smell of it's like a musk, you know, like that kind of
Egyptian musk.
coffee, dark, kind of oaky, you know, that kind of vibe, you know, like a deep, rich kind of. I suppose it's quite a masculine smell, but I like those kind of smells, you know. I wouldn't be a florally kind of perfumery kind of guy, you know.
I'll be sure to give you some when I come up to play five-a-side football. I've got some from Egypt last November.
Really?
Yeah, Egyptian musk. I'm actually wearing it.
Smells good, does it?
Can you smell it through the webcam?
Smell of vision.
Tell me, what have you got a glitch in the Matrix story? We interviewed Mark Atwood last year, who does the Diary of a Conspiracy Theorist, has quite a big following in the States, and he said his whole life had been like a glitch in the Matrix story. But has there been any incident or anything that happened to you that, apart from what you've described already, where you had an opportunity to question reality?
The reality that we live in. So let me see, has there been a glitch in the Matrix? There's been so many kind of small kind of glitches, you know. Um, I suppose the most trippy one that comes to mind is when I wasn't well the first time. I had two kind of big moments in my life where I wasn't well. I'm in Spain. I'm at a party, and there was a lady there with piercing blue eyes, Germanic white hair, and because I didn't feel very safe, I was kind of panicky. I sat beside her for some reason. I felt comfortable. About 3 days later, I went for my first ever Reiki healing. I didn't even know what it was. I thought it was a massage.
Right.
And I knocked on this little kind of cabin on the beach, and the door opened, and it was that woman. And I kind of said, that's fucking weird. You know what I
She
mean?
summoned you.
Yeah. And the reason I see that now as a glitch in the Matrix is because that began everything that I do now, because she recommended Conversations with God as a book. She
Neil
recommended,
Donald Walsh.
I became a Reiki healer, and all of that kind of stuff. That was that woman, and she was just plonked right into my experience, and that's glitchy.
And now you've got like a global sort of online and in print Positive Life magazine. You're
Yeah,
interviewing the likes of Lee Harris and Gabor Mate
yeah.
and some well-known figures. And all I can do is thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation with you. You're more than welcome to come back, and we'll do it again sometime. And I've got a last 1 minute quick fire round for you,
Yeah.
and then we're pretty much done.
Okay, man. Go ahead, Carl.
Aldi or Lidl?
Little.
England or Germany?
Germany.
Blonde or brunette?
Brunette.
Sunset or sunrise?
Sunset.
Manchester or Liverpool?
I'll go Manchester.
Brown or pink?
Brown.
Spots or stripes?
Stripes.
Kerry or Dublin?
Dublin.
I knew you were going to say that. Gardening or the gym?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'll go gardening.
Boccherini or Echo and the Bunnymen?
Echo and the Bunnyman.
Sun or moon?
Sun.
Emerald or ruby?
Emerald.
Silver or gold?
Silver.
Meat or wine?
Wine.
Carrots or onions?
Carrots.
Salt or pepper?
Salt.
And finally, forest or beach?
Oh. I'm gonna go beach near a forest.
So again, Paul Congdon at Positive Life, thank you so much for your time today, and God bless you.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you
Pleasure,
so
man.
much.
Cheers.